You're listening to 91.7 FM, WSUW, in Whitewater, Wisconsin. You're listening to Rashkin Report. You're listening to WSUW 91.7 FM, The Edge in Whitewater, Wisconsin. This is Rashkin Report, and I'm your host, Yuri Rashkin. I'm excited to welcome to the program today a professor of Concordia University, joining us via Skype from Montreal, Canada, Mikhail Iossel. Mikhail, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
You have originally lived in Russia. You left Russia many years ago, about 30 years ago, and you have been living here. Now you're in Canada. What are your thoughts on the connection between what is going on in Russia these days versus what is going on in America these days, where you have somebody like right now a very well-known, famous theater director who is now being arrested for corruption, basically, and thievery, supposedly. And at the same time, in the United States, so this is kind of like a high level of repressions, really, in Russia is what we're observing. While in the United States, you have a State Department that has kind of a lights-out policy on one hand, and sanctions on the other hand. How do you see these two situations, what developing in the United States and in Russia, affecting each other?
Well, both directly and indirectly, it's a fairly complex interconnection, multi-layered. But it is beyond a shadow of a doubt that, of course, Trump presidency has given a certain amount of carte blanche to Putin to do whatever he wants inside the country, inside Russia, because for a variety of reasons, because America's hands-off policy on human rights and disinterest in human rights, and Trump's precarious position as president, basically more or less having given up his moral authority inside the country and being rendered more and more irrelevant with each passing day, and the fact that American political establishment has rendered its verdict on Putin basically as a pariah, an international pariah on a par with Iran and North Korean leaders. Simply put, he has got nothing more to lose. And in Europe, his capacity for blackmailing European countries via oil and gas price manipulation has decreased dramatically, and his relevance accordingly, and he's viewed as a stark force for evil, basically, by all European countries, by larger European countries, and supported by smaller European leaders. But he does not feel that his personal situation can deteriorate much further as a result of his cranking up repressions inside Russia. Outside, in the international arena, that's a whole different matter, because NATO has demonstrated its resolve to oppose his further international encroachments, and also because sanctions, already painful and already humiliating, imposed upon him by the U.S. Congress and supported by the European Union, can be made still more painful yet for him on a personal level, concerning his personal assets, and so he's kind of circumspect and more or less hemmed in when it comes to freedom to act abroad. But within Russia, basically he's got free hand, and that all of that is happening against the backdrop of deteriorating economic situation and growing kind of stirring rumbling in the populace, basically, and also in light of the 2018 elections. They still are elections. In other words, referendum on Putin. It will be falsified massively, and it will be no elections. But it will be a sort of a referendum on Putin. And Putin has basically replaced his original compact with the Russian people, which is to say, you stay away from politics. Democracy is just the euphemism for nothing, and it's a Western invention, and you don't have to worry yourself about this. You stay away from all of that. Let us take care of the political things, and we, on the other hand, in turn, guarantee that your living standards will be going up from year to year. And that worked up until 2008, but after 2008, he could no longer maintain his end of the bargain. And so he's sort of like recalibrated and rearranged the compact in a not so subtle way, but basically we're a besieged fortress. The world is against us. Yes, we will have to go through a certain period of hardship, and unfortunately, you will feel that. And but we will preserve our historical and moral uniqueness. We will be the pole of moral superiority in the world. We will be again, as in the Soviet time, we were a beacon of moral purity, and the rest of the world the world of imperialism again, and the corrupt, amoral world of the West is against us, and we must and it's bent on destroying us, and we must resist. And so that's the compact, and it no longer probably is working. The effect of the Crimea annexation has worn off. Probably people cannot really live in an atmosphere of heightened, overblown militaristic rhetoric. People want to lead normal lives in a way. They cannot sustain themselves in this, in the sense of being on the verge of another massive, cataclysm. And so people just get emotional and benumbed and tired. And so he needs to come up with something else. And this may well be in the absence of an opportunity to start another small war in Ukraine, be it or Latvia or Lithuania or Estonia. He's lost the capacity for doing that. But he has free hand at clamping down on the small percent of the people who are representing values that are incompatible with the kind of values that he claims Russian people historically have had, which is to say, it's basically an open season on pro-Western segment of Russian populace, and unfortunately, it was kind of foreseeable in some way, and it pains me that that's. But it's the fact, and I was kind of hoping that more people he could close down the borders tomorrow, and then what? It's happened. It's happened before in Russian history. Nothing extraordinary has happened between 1990 and 2017. It was just another fluke in Russian history, another small period of relative liberalization, and now it's time to go back to the cold. Does
it make you feel sad?
Yeah, it makes me feel sad because I have lots of friends there, obviously, and because I have a very strong intrinsic connection to the place where I was born and spent the first half of my life, which is a more meaningful part of one's life. The first 30 years, it's a life. So I've lived a life there, and of course, it saddens me that I would feel that right now would be time for people to leave while they still can. But then, what do people do and how? Although I suppose at this point, places like the United States or Canada or Australia would be granting political asylum because it's a clearly Russia is no longer this postmodernist discourse that Russia is slightly different but still a normal quote unquote country no longer applies. It no longer is a quote unquote normal kind of country. It's a strongly authoritarian state which is on the verge of becoming a totalitarian one. So yeah, it's sad.
You're listening to 91.7 FM WSUW in Whitewater, Wisconsin, The Edge. This is Rashkin Report, and I'm your host, Yuri Rashkin. Joining me today via Skype from Montreal, Canada, is writer and a professor at Concordia University, Mikhail Iossel. Mikhail, you have left many years ago, again, as we were saying, and you mentioned that, have things changed or have things not really changed? Is this, so this is just a one continuous thing, but how do you feel that whether it changed or not, to go back to our president that we are dealing with and his connection with Russia, how Russia keeps popping up all over the place and is the center of the universe, or perhaps a different place. Do you feel that the connection between Trump and Russia makes sense to you, or does it, or is it hard to believe?
Oh. It is not hard to believe. It takes very little effort to believe, actually. So it's sort of, again, Mueller investigation, everything will come to light that is supposed to come to light. He has got a team of crack professionals, lawyers, investigators, some of them Russian-speaking. They clearly are digging hard into his finances and financial dealings with Russia. It is there are certain matters that are very much on the surface, like instances of money laundering on Trump's part involving Russian oligarchs, and the fact that Trump Tower was occupied, and the whole floor was apparently occupied by mob structure from Russia, and that he has been dealing with and close with certain mob figures from among Russian emigre community, like Felix Sater and so forth, who keeps giving interviews saying that in a month everything will blow up and he's going to jail and Trump is going to jail and so forth. So it's again, it's back in the 90s after his last and most ruinous bankruptcy, when no bank would lend him money, he crossed over to the quote unquote dark side and started dealing with less than stellar structures and people, the government of Azerbaijan, taking money from Russians and from Russian-controlled banks, and having money channeled through the Cyprus bank controlled by current Minister of Finances to his casinos and so forth. All of that is already floating on the surface. Wilbur Ross Bank in Cyprus through Manafort and so forth to Taj Mahal. That was just recently published. All of that is on the surface. And there is absolutely no doubt that Trump basically, his highest priority is Trump and Trump organization, and strong belief that no matter what, he needs to stay afloat and keep enriching himself. And that's the only item of moral code that he operates under. And so, it's not difficult to believe, but I do think that when all the revelations come to light, it will probably be the greatest political scandals in American modern history, because it will just be fairly stunning. I don't know about treason as such. I think that Trump, if a traitor, then an unwitting one, because he basically will do anything for money and he doesn't see anything wrong with it. But there clearly was some kind of cooperation between Russia, and things that will come to light are going to be, I think, pretty horrifying.
If you feel that this is since you feel that this is really on the surface, and I can't argue with you. I think it feels that it's right there. It's a pretty direct connection. But a lot of people from Russia, and this may come as a surprise to our American listeners, or maybe not as a surprise, is that people from Russia very frequently happen to be quite conservative and and it may seem surprising or it may seem logical, but they seem to rather be more interested in supporting conservative Republican policy rather than democratic policies with a large D here. Professor Iossel, what do you feel is the reason for such politicization of Russian immigration?
Well, first off, it's always been throughout the history of American consecutive waves of immigration to the United States that first generation of immigrants are largely conservative. And that means that they just cleave to simpler ideologies and clearer delineation between right and wrong, black, white, and so forth. In other words, they long for a simpler picture of the world. And the Republican Party conservative ideology offers them a no chiaroscuro kind of picture of the world, us, them, which meshes very easily with the totalitarian mindset that most Russian immigrants still are, willy-nilly. It's just the replacement of pluses to minuses and so forth in their minds. But nonetheless, we all grew up knowing that he who's not with us is against us. If enemy doesn't give up, he must be destroyed and so forth. And the word compromise was a dirty word in Russian vocabulary. In the case of so it's not difficult to understand that first immigration of immigrants, especially from Eastern Europe, in other words, coming from a history of oppression, they have been basically, humiliated their whole lives there. They come here, they feel natural human desire to start humiliating someone else and to oppress someone. And it basically happens to be anyone who doesn't look or sound like them, which is to say, people with different skin color. That's kind of understandable in a way. They don't know English language well. They don't understand the nuances of the political situation in the country. They watch Russian television, which explains them in the language that they understand what happens in the United States. They also watch Fox News, which also simplifies its language to the point of their understanding it because it appeals to raw emotion and, again, black and white, Manichaean, very simple, monochromatic picture of the world, and that gives people a certain amount of emotional comfort to know that you are on the side of something very certain, and you're opposed to someone who is bad, unequivocally bad, and that's your position in the world. You're on the right side of history. But there are so many sub-layers and mini aspects to this. The history of people being Soviet Jews when they're basically generally were like appointed Jews. You just get your passport and it's like right there on the fifth line from the top, you're a Jew. How come? I don't know anything about it. Well, but somebody has to be a Jew, right? So why not you, right? It's a lottery. And so this sense that you have been unfairly chosen, sort of like designated Jew. Sort of like you've been unfairly chosen. You don't know anything about being Jewish. You are Jew via negativa, through disapprobation and hostility on the part of.
Is it like losing in a lottery?
Yeah, if you believe in lottery, you have to believe in negative lottery as well, right? If you feel it's fair for you to win $500 million at some point, then it's equally fair if you have a serious illness somewhere down the road. Lottery is lottery. It's luck or lack thereof, which is basically the same thing. Just replace pluses with minuses. So yeah, somebody has to be born Jewish. Some people are born tall and beautiful, and they play basketball and they make millions of dollars. And some people are short and they have cleft palates, club foot, and we're Jews. So it's a handicap in life. You can spend your life moaning about this or wallowing in self-pity, or you can take advantage of that as a massive motivating factor and studying double hard in order to be on a par with everybody else and so forth. We all know that.
Professor Iossel, I do have a question for you then, the kind of that I'd like to get your take on. I find it very interesting that having traveled from Russia to America, I went from being Jewish with everything, all the parameters that you described, to being a white male. And it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, but that's true. But the KKK and Trump supporters don't think so, actually. They don't think you're a white male or me. They think that we're Jews. And
yes, but then they get confused because we don't necessarily follow Jewish religion.
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter, kind of. It's just unfortunate. It's kind of unfortunate, but so Jews are Jews. And so so when they parade around in Charlottesville and elsewhere saying like Jews are Satan's children or like Jews will not replace us and so forth, what do they mean essentially? Well, they mean that Jews are not like them. Jews are enemies. They may look white, but they're not Christian, and they've always sought to do harm to Russian people or to simple American people, to white people in general. So, yeah.
By that logic, all you have to do is hang a cross on your neck and you're fine.
I'm not sure it's so easy. I don't think they can be mollified, I think once a Jew, always a Jew. Although, who the hell knows? Yeah.
Who the hell knows?
I don't, yeah.
Right.
So yeah, it's
it is what it is.
It is what it is, and it's almost inevitable that the majority of Russian immigrants arriving in the United States are still in the process of arriving. None of them have basically they are Americans, but they are Americans that don't have a sense of what America necessarily is in its complexity, in its development. They have their own segment of American life, and that's fair. But that's basically that explains their outlook on life and the way they vote, the way they view people, the way they treat people, the way they sometimes touchingly naive and saying like, what's wrong with being a racist? Is it like frowned upon here? Why can't I be a racist? I'm a racist. So so it's kind of it's infantile. And so, but then again, immigration kind of reduces you to child status for a while necessarily, and some people just stay in that status. So it on the one hand, of course, it is kind of hilarious in a bittersweet way to see how Jews are basically, transmuted from being Trump supporters to like Nazi supporters. Really? but then, or that Black Lives Matter is worse than Nazis or just as bad. No, they're not just as bad. Black Lives Matter want to gain equality. White supremacists want actually to gain superiority. You have to feel the differences. So and so on. But it's kind of natural kind of development for, like I said, for first generation immigrants. It's kind of natural. That's a way of coping with complexity of life.
All right. Well, then, Professor Iossel, in conclusion, what are your thoughts on the difference in the political climate that you are speaking with us from Montreal, Canada, which is a whole other country? So how do you feel the difference between what's going on in the United States and the climate here versus where you are?
Well, political history and political culture of Canada has always been different from that in the United States, in that it's always been search for shared ground, for compromise of sorts, for shared understanding, for mutual trust in a way. In the United States, political history has always been this relentless clash of tectonic plates of history, always the end of the world, always never before in our history have we witnessed, and so forth. Never before, in every generation and every time it happens, never before, this is the end of the world, and it never is the end of the world, but it always is balancing on the precipice, on the edge of the precipice. So it's just two very basic models of dealing with their own country's history. Canada is a much younger country. Canada has long been in search of its own identity. It's for a very long time it's identified itself primarily as we're not America, meaning that we are kind of kinder, better, more pleasant, in a sense that we do not leave our people behind, no matter why. They are less talented, less smart, less energetic, less enterprising. For whatever reason, they should have health insurance. They should have it, and nobody is left to fall through the cracks of the system and die somewhere in a ditch. It doesn't happen here. So Canadians take pride in that. Canadians take pride in the fact that they pay higher taxes for the privilege of feeling good about themselves. And themselves in the world, that none of their compatriots are suffering while they're eating cake. And that's, and no one kind of succumbs to the angry, dark feeling like, well, screw them. I worked hard in my life and what did they do? Let them fend for themselves. It's not my fault that loser doesn't have health insurance. What do I care? I have mine. So that's not applicable here. So I think that's the difference. And also Canada has become a sort of like as the United States is becoming harsher and more hard-edged country, and has been over the last 30 years approximately, especially, since the Reagan presidency. Canada has been shifting towards greater kind of inclusion. It's a kinder country in a way. It treats immigrants differently. It welcomes immigrants, although again in very limited and very kind of structured way. Generally, it's just it's same people in different historical circumstances, but it's the same people more or less, with the exception of francophones of Quebec. But that issue is also dying down now, more or less, because there's been a very intense search for harmony, and it seems like it's been successful. So that's what I have to say about, on the surface, between the difference between the United States and Canada, political culture.
Well, Professor Iossel, thank you so much for being on the program. Good luck to you, and any information on how, any way people can get in touch, read any of your writings?
Well, people can find me on Facebook. People can Google me and read me. I publish often on NewYorker.com and other places. And so, all my public posts on Facebook are public, so you can find everything there if you want. And thank you for an interesting conversation, Yuri.
Thank you. Take care.
You're listening to 91.7 FM, WSUW, in Whitewater, Wisconsin. You're listening to Rashkin Report.